Good afternoon, everyone. We're just waiting 1 second to let a few more people trickle in, and we'll get started in about 1 minute.
All right, so we'll get started here. So good afternoon, everyone. For all that don't know me, my name is Andrew Tate. I'm an account manager here at Detail Roofing. I'm happy to be joined by Jessica Campbell, who's also an account manager here at Detail Roofing. And our presenter today will be Kelly McDonald, who is our client engagement and events coordinator. With the time of the year, we thought what better time to present on the scary part of the year, the winter months, and the havoc that it can have on your roof systems here in beautiful Canada. Today's presentation will be an hour long. We will be launching some poll questions, so we do encourage everyone's participation. Before we get started, I just want to touch on a few housekeeping items. This presentation is being recorded and will be made available by the end of the week, which we will email a link to everyone. The live session is valid for 1 CPE credit and will be available to report through the CMRAO portal by tomorrow. Following the webinar, the attendance report will be sent to the CMRAO as attendees' proof of completion. We will not be issuing a certificate. And at the bottom of the screen, if everyone does see, there is a Q&A button. If you do want to submit a question, please use that function. And at the end of the presentation, we will get to everyone's question. I will now turn it over to our presenter extraordinaire, Kelly McDonald.
Thank you, Andrew, and thank you, everybody, for taking the time to join us today. As Andrew mentioned, very topical right now, talking about getting prepared for winter. We have been pretty fortunate this month to get some unseasonably warm temperatures and some milder conditions. However, unfortunately, the weather will be changing very soon. We will be experiencing standard winter weather. So we just want to make sure that we go over some items today on how you can best prepare your roof, whether you have a tower or a townhome, and regardless of what type of roof system you have on your building. So yeah, no surprise, throughout the winter months, we do experience harsh weather conditions, such as heavy snow accumulation, freezing temperatures, temperature fluctuations, and winter storms. These can all lead to a variety of stresses to your roof system, which we'll go over a bit. So before we really dive into the meat of the presentation, we just want to find out a quick question for everyone here today. So if Andrew, you can launch our first poll. All right, so we have our first poll up there. Do you manage a tower or townhome? Or neither, or both?
All right, so it looks like a lot of towers here. Very good. And a good mix of townhomes and obviously a good mix of both. So I'm going to end the poll. I will share results with everyone here. So as you can see, like I said, we have a good mix of both, a lot more towers as well. So I will turn it back over to Kelly.
All right. So one of the biggest stressors that we see throughout the winter months has to do with the temperature fluctuations. So between October to April, and even this month in October, we've already started to see it a little bit, where at the beginning of this week, we had our first frost, our first below freezing temperatures. And then later in the day, later this week, we're experiencing, high teens, early 20 temperatures. So this back and forth weather fluctuation, it can cause a lot of stress to the roof as it causes the membrane to expand and contract. This weather fluctuation can lead to splits and cracks in the membrane, which can cause a variety of issues. We also see an uptick of leaks in the winter months, of course, because of the ice and snow that's accumulating and then melting. But then in the milder periods that we do experience, we tend to see a lot more rain in those periods. So, for example, in January 2020, not only was it a very mild month and there was quite a bit of rain, but there was actually more rain in January 2020 than any other month of the year. So with all of these factors in mind, we definitely want to make sure that our roofs are prepared to withstand all of these weather elements. So there's no way to completely eliminate leaks or any other roof issues. However, just to make sure that your building stands the best chance of being able to stand up to this volatility of the winter weather, we highly recommend completing overall roof inspections and carrying out any recommended maintenance items ahead of winter. Typically, what you're looking for in the fall or in any other time of year are any areas that are vulnerable, any areas already experiencing defects or deterioration that might be exacerbated over the winter months. Also, any weak points, any areas that are open or exposed, anything that can become worse over the winter months or could present a leak issue. Overall, what you want to present or prevent through these inspections and through carrying out various maintenance items would be interior leaks, pest infiltration, ice damming, and hazards from slips and falls. So what we want to look at now is, again, whether you manage a tower or a townhome, and regardless of what type of roof you have on your building, what specifically can you look for and address in the fall? First and foremost, drainage. No matter what type of building you have, again, through the winter months, we tend to see a lot more precipitation, whether it's through rain, snow, ice accumulation. So having a lot of excess water built up on the roof, melting on the roof surfaces, you want to make sure that that water has a place to go. So making sure that the drainage is clear in the fall so that you are preventing any blockages or clogs in the winter months is especially important. The specific type of maintenance that's required for the drains is going to depend on the building type and the specific type of drainage that you have. So we will look at a few different examples of those. This issue mainly with flat roof surfaces. We do see some heavy debris built up on sloped roofs, but typically that's if it is a low slope roof. Without this wouldn't be too much of an incline on it. But on flat roofs, especially lower roof areas, and if there are a lot of trees in the area, we can see a heavy buildup of debris, especially this time of year as all the leaves are falling. So making sure that any heavy debris throughout the roof surfaces is removed so that water does have a clear path to the drains on the roof surface. And depending on the type of debris that's built up, you just want to also make sure that if it is any heavy debris, it's not going to cause any damage to the actual roof surfaces themselves. So clearing any heavy debris on the actual roof surfaces, highly recommended in the fall. With flat roofs, especially in the case where we have an inverted roof system where you have the membrane covered by insulation, filter cloth, and gravel ballast, we see a lot of issues with blockages at these drains. So sometimes it's a little more minimal. You might have some small vegetation or moss growth happening. You want to get that removed again just to prevent any blockages from occurring there. Some of the other issues that we see are if the gravel is covering the drain entirely, you want to make sure that they're not covered so the water can adequately drain. And also just being able to locate your drains easily in cases of emergencies is very important. So in cases where you do have an inverted roof system, we do recommend installing a custom fabricated gravel guard. So that would just be perforated metal. You can see the top of one here that would just go around the drain just to try and help prevent anything from covering and burying the drain completely, whether it is gravel or various debris. One thing that a gravel guard isn't going to prevent, but that you do want to take care of if it is occurring, is any extreme vegetation growth at the drains. So in both of these cases here, We have some really extreme vegetation, actual trees growing out of the drains. This one is so bad that you can't even see that it's a drain anymore. It's a tree just growing straight out of there. So of course, when it's become this severe, you're not going to have adequate drainage at these particular locations. So making sure that drains are clear of any gravel, debris, or vegetation is very important. But also, if you do have vegetation growth occurring, especially in extreme cases like we just saw, you want to make sure that the roofer that you hire is not only clearing the drains from any debris or obstructions, but also checking the surrounding membrane. In cases where there is extreme vegetation, not all the time, but in some cases, the roots of the vegetation can actually penetrate the membrane or penetrate the drain insert, which can lead to damages and then inevitably leaks as well. So making sure that it is removed carefully so that the removal process is also not causing any damage to the drain or to the membrane, and ensuring that if any damages are created when the removal is happening, or if there are already damages occurring, that those are repaired ahead of the winter months. Even if there's not vegetation occurring, or any type of growth. Also just checking the membrane around the drain to ensure that, again, there isn't already deterioration occurring that could become worse over the winter months, or any openings where water may be able to infiltrate and cause a leak issue. All right, so now with sloped roof townhomes, mainly we see them here. Sometimes we do see them on high rises as well, but any eaves troughs or gutter debris. So Andrew, I believe we have another poll to pull up here.
Thanks, Kelly. I'm going to launch the second poll question. So, do you currently have your gutters cleaned ahead of winter? Yes or no? This will be a very good telltale sign of who we're going to contact after. Very good. So we do have a good percentage of people that do have their gutters cleaned out. Perfect. Great. So I am going to end the poll and I will share results with everyone. So as you can see, the majority of people here do have their gutters cleaned, which is a great thing for preparing for winter months. So thank you for that. While I am here, I am going to launch another poll question. And this one asks, are you routinely completing other maintenance or repair items on your sloped roof in the fall? So again, single choice, yes or no.
Sorry, I don't think that one was launched.
Yeah, I don't think that one did launch. Let me try that again. Sorry, guys. There we go. That's better. So are you completing other maintenance or repair items on your slope roof in the fall? Very good. So we do have good majority of people are doing maintenance. Excellent. So I will end the poll there and share the results with everyone as well. So as you can see, like I said, a good majority of everyone is presenting or doing maintenance on their sloped roofs, where the others are not. So I'm going to share it back with Kelly. Thank you.
Yeah, so the majority of people are completing both gutter cleaning and maintenance, which is great to see. A lot of the people that we talk to that do manage townhome complexes or any areas that do have sections of eaves troughs or gutters, it is a very standard maintenance item that they are completing every year. And that is because it is very important to make sure, especially in areas like this where you do have a lot of tree coverage and do have a lot of buildup of leaves and other debris in the gutters, it is important to make sure that these are cleared so that, again, in the winter months when you have snow and ice built up, you're not going to have this debris freezing or causing any blockages that may disrupt the drainage throughout the roof surfaces. You also want to make sure that the downspouts are clear of any debris or blockages ahead of the winter months. So another type of drainage that we see commonly, especially on flat roof townhomes, would be the overflow drains or the scuppers. So similarly, you want to make sure that any built up debris in the scuppers themselves are removed so that everything is adequately draining. There are some times, especially because of the shape of them, that we do see birds trying to nest in these areas. and creating issues there as well. Another common thing with the scupper drains is they are always going to be roofed in with a membrane where they're meeting the building where it's opening here. So you want to make sure that there aren't any issues with the membrane itself that may lead to a leak issue. So in both of these cases, the membrane is starting to detach and lift a little bit. Same with this one here. So in both of these cases, there were leaks occurring because of the fact that the water was, when it was going to drain, was coming back under the membrane and then causing an interior leak issue. So in cases like this, if it is just starting to lift, it's not a situation where you necessarily have to replace the membrane entirely. There are different solutions like various sealants or a 2-ply sealant with a reinforcing fleece or reinforcing mesh that can just help to reinforce this area and ensure that it's not going to be lifting up and allowing water to enter. Along with the actual gutters themselves, you want to make sure that anything that's attached to it for drainage is also in place and functioning as intended. So in this particular complex, there were a few issues with the downspouts throughout. So if there are any areas where a downspout is missing entirely, you want to make sure that that is reinstalled ahead of the winter months, again, just to prevent any staining or issues with the building exterior or having any water and ice build up here, which can present slip and fall hazards in the winter months. Also, just taking a closer look to see if there's any defects with the actual downspouts or any of the straps. It is a bit hard to see here, but along this downspout, there is a pretty big crack along the side. So if water is draining out of this, it's not going to be coming down straight. It's going to be pouring out of the side, which can also cause various issues. And again, because this strap is not installed, it's a bit loose right now, there are some openings here that can cause water to drain inadequately. Inside the actual gutters, a lot of the gutters that we see are continuous seamless gutters. If there are seams throughout, whether it's every 10 feet, every 12 feet, you just want to make sure that there aren't any openings in those seams where the water may cause leaks from the gutters themselves. And even in cases where you do have a continuous gutter, there still are going to be seams at the ends and at the outlets where the downspouts are attached. So again, just making sure that these are adequately sealed. There are various sealants available just to make sure that there aren't going to be any openings that would allow water to come through and cause leaks from the gutters. So next up, whether again it's a tower or a townhome, there are various areas through the roof where caulking is either required or recommended. So any areas where there is deteriorated caulking or other sealants, especially in cases like we have here where it's become so deteriorated that it's brittle, it's cracked, there's openings, you want to make sure that that is renewed so that there's not potential leak issues. Very often caulking is a first line of defense. So in the case here, the caulking that we have that's split, allowing water to get in, is at the top of roof flashing. So because it's split, then the flashing is exposed, allowing water to get in and cause a leak issue. In other cases, like these guys here, we have the metal flashing seams, which the caulking is deteriorated and allowing water to get through. Unfortunately, underneath, there wasn't any waterproofing there. It was just plywood underneath. So if the caulking becomes deteriorated and isn't acting as that first line of defense and water is able to infiltrate, if there's not a waterproofing membrane, then that can become a leak issue. So just a further example of that, we had this location here. They have had a few leak issues with this particular issue. So again, the metal flashing going down the control joint had some severely deteriorated caulking throughout. And because there wasn't a waterproofing underlayment underneath, it was just plywood. Once that water got in, it did seep into the plywood, eventually got into the attic, caused a leak issue. Generally speaking, if you have widespread areas that don't have any waterproofing underneath, it may not be feasible to go add waterproofing where it doesn't currently exist. That would be a large, expensive project. So that's why you want to ensure that if there are any caulking requirements, you have the caulking up to date and in good condition, so that it's not going to have any splits or openings that may lead to a leak issue. So another issue that we see with sealant, especially in the winter months when you have snow accumulating on various roof surfaces, are issues with balconies. So one thing to keep in mind is that balconies should be considered the same as a roof, especially if it's covering another unit or another balcony below. You want to make sure that there aren't any leak or waterproofing concerns. So one of the issues that we see very often when snow is built up in the winter months is if there is any caulking along the doorway or along the threshold that has become deteriorated and allows water to back up behind the metal and get into the same unit where the balcony is. So in this particular case here, when you first look at the caulking, it doesn't look too bad. It's not deteriorated. It's not brittle. There's no cracks in it. However, it wasn't adhering properly along the length of the balcony. That could be because it wasn't a good quality caulking. It could have been how it was applied. It could have been the preparation before the caulking was applied itself. But for whatever reason, there were issues with the caulking, allowing water to get in and cause a leak issue into the interior. So just making sure that whether you're having somebody inspect the balconies or having residents keep an eye out, just to ensure that any caulking requirements on balcony surfaces or private terraces are addressed so that leak issues aren't coming up in the winter months. All right, so next, this is one of the biggest things we always talk about is roof penetrations. And when we're talking about roof penetrations, what we mean specifically are any cored areas of the roof surface or the exterior walls for things like plumbing, ventilation, electrical, anything like that where there is going to be a hole in the roof. These areas are especially vulnerable because it's a hole through the roof or through the walls, and can be quite susceptible to leaks. So in any cases where you do have something poured through the roof or the walls, there should always be flashing in place, like we have at the bases here, here, and here. So that flashing is going to help to protect that vulnerable area and divert any water away to prevent any leak issues. Again, with the temperature fluctuations, these areas especially can experience more stress and more movement in the winter months. So you want to make sure that any issues, whether it be from weather-related or pest-related damages, improper installation, or deterioration, you want to make sure that these are addressed ahead of the winter months to try and prevent any potential leak issues. So just taking a look at some of the different examples of flashing that we see at roof penetrations and some of the issues that can occur. If you do have a flat roof, regardless of the type of membrane, if the bases of the penetration where it meets the membrane is visible, that does make it a lot easier to detect any potential issues that are occurring or any potential installation errors. As you can see in the second photo here, there is a bit of a gap occurring here just from deterioration. So in a case like this, if there is any opening or if it's starting to split and deteriorate, it's not necessarily a case where you would have to replace the flashing or replace the membrane. In cases like this, you can, again, apply a compatible liquid membrane up the base just to help seal and reinforce those bases. With this particular case, throughout the complex, they actually did experience an issue because of the quality of materials for the flashing. You can see there's a bit of rust occurring here. There was severe rust on the inside of these vents, and they have so far had a couple blocks that have need to be replaced because of leak issues related to the flashing. But again, if you are having any issues with the bases, you can apply a reinforcing liquid membrane. In this case here, we see this a lot with high dome flashing. So this is typically installed at the bases of plumbing stacks on flat roof surfaces. We very regularly encounter situations where they almost seem sort of kicked in. There's some dents and everything throughout. If there's some dents, but there's no perforations or holes, not the end of the world. However, in this case, there is a small hole at the bottom here that was causing a leak issue. So in a case like that, if there are any holes in the flashing, whether it is from man-made damage or from corrosion that can happen over time, we do recommend having that replaced so that it's not going to cause a leak issue. Another thing that we see regularly, and anybody that was on our webinar last month, we went over this a bit more thoroughly, but installation issues. So installation issues with flashing at various roof penetrations is something that we see quite often. So the two main things that we see is if the flashing is too large for whatever is going through the roof. So in this case, we have vents, and the B vent flashing at the bottom is too large. There is a storm collar or rain collar in place to help try and divert the water that's running down. However, even that isn't large enough to cover the flashing that's at the base, and there is quite a large gap left open here that can allow water to get in. Another issue that we see with flashing that you would want to address to prevent any leaks would be if there's a compatibility issue. So there are different types of flashing that are compatible with different roof types and with different membrane types. So in this particular case, the flashing that was installed is not compatible for a modified bitumen membrane that's installed on this roof. It would be compatible for a single ply, like a TPO roof surface. So in this case, there was over time an adhesion issue, and the flashing started to lift. So again, if it's starting to lift like this, it's not going to function as intended, and it is allowing water to get in and cause an interior leak issue. So where it becomes a little more difficult is when we encounter roof penetrations on protected roof systems, like a green roof or an inverted roof system. So with both of these roof systems, you cannot see the base of the penetration where it's meeting the membrane, because the membrane is covered by various layers of the protected roof system. So you're not going to be able to just walk out on the roof surface and be able to spot if there is any deterioration occurring or corrosion or anything wrong with the flashing or any installation errors. What we recommend is, whether in the fall or throughout the year, whenever you're having your maintenance completed, it's not a bad idea to inspect the bases of these penetrations, just to get ahead of any issues that might be occurring and identify if there is deterioration or defects. So just an example of some of the issues that we have seen when the bases of penetrations have been exposed, whether it's through regular maintenance or during a leak investigation. As you can see, there's a variety of issues that can happen, whether it's corrosion, deterioration, the flashing again being too large for what it is that's penetrating the roof, all of which can lead to leak issues. As we saw in the last photo, the vents that were there were quite rusted, not only at the bases, but throughout the vents themselves. So if you do have a roof surface where there is severe rust occurring, those are definitely the areas that you want to check first. Not every single time, but it stands to reason that if there is rust occurring at the top of the flashing, it could be occurring closer to the base as well, which can lead to a leak issue. And just for an example, this penetration here, where there's a number of holes throughout, and there was a big leak issue occurring, when the roof system is all installed and that insulation, filter cloth, and gravel ballast is all in place, you can only see till the top here. So all of this underneath, hidden, you cannot see it unless you're removing the layers of the roof system. So outside of penetrations, other things to look for on flat roof surfaces would be any damage or deterioration to the actual membrane itself. So it's just some of the common things that we see with a few of the different roof types. Very often with single ply membranes, whether that is TPO, EPDM, or PVC, especially in residential condos, we do tend to see a lot of very small defects such as holes in the membrane. Sometimes they're not necessarily widespread. Again, it's going to depend on the area, the foot traffic on the roof surface, a number of different events, weather events. However, we do find that these membranes are punctured quite easily. So we do recommend just having the membrane inspected to identify any holes and having them patched ahead of winter months. With this type of membrane, if you do have holes like this that are occurring, it's not a situation where you would have to replace the whole roof. There is compatible membrane that can be used to patch up any small holes as they're occurring and be dealt with as a localized issue. With any type of membrane, whether it is a single ply or a modified bitumen membrane, if there's any open seams, any splits, any openings in the membrane like we have here, just making sure that that's properly adhered, sealed, and watertight so that you're not having any water entry happen there. With a tar and gravel or built up roof system, that roof system especially, we tend to see a lot of issues in the winter months with the temperature fluctuations and the splits and the cracks occurring. Really, there's not a way that you're going to be able to prevent the splits and cracks from occurring, especially because a lot of the times these are older systems on older buildings. However, again, if there already are defects in the membrane with the built-up roof system, just getting those addressed in the fall months, having it repaired. Again, you can do that in a localized area with compatible membrane, just so that the weather fluctuations aren't going to cause any existing splits and cracks to grow and become worse over the winter months. With the two-ply SBS modified bitumen membrane, something that we see very often, especially after years of prolonged UV exposure, is loss of the UV protective granules. So if there is minimal loss of granules, you can apply a compatible liquid membrane and just top up or renew the loose granules. However, in extreme cases, more extensive repairs may be required, like applying a new second ply cap sheet. In this case, it is a more severe situation where it's past the point of doing localized maintenance and you would have to do some more extensive repairs, not necessarily a full replacement, but just keeping an eye out for any loss of granules and identifying and addressing them early before it gets too extreme. So again, with sloped roofs and shingles, especially this time of year, we find that raccoons, squirrels, and other sorts of animals, they are trying to find a nice warm place for the winter. So we do tend to see an uptick in various vent damages from pest infiltration. So making sure that any of these damages that may be caused from pests or otherwise are addressed so that you're not having additional pest infiltration or any leak issues. In all of these cases here, we would recommend having these vents replaced instead of just doing a Band-Aid fix. Also, if you are experiencing a situation with pest infiltration, before having the vents replaced or any work done on the roof, we do recommend having pest control go into the attic just to confirm if there is anything living in the attic and having that safely removed before any roofing work is completed. With these particular vents here, the AF50 air outtake vents for the attic, one thing that we notice is that with the plastic ones especially, it is quite easy for squirrels, raccoons, other animals to get into these. So in a case if you are having widespread pest infiltration issues and you have plastic vents, we may recommend aluminum vents in those cases, again, depending on the issue, just to try and keep anything out of the attic. Another thing that can be looked at in regards to shingled roof surfaces, whether on townhomes or otherwise, is any critical shingle damages. So of course, in these situations here, we have some fairly large sections of missing shingles. And not only are the shingles missing, but there's also not any sort of underlayment beneath these shingles. So the plywood is left exposed, which can, of course, cause a leak issue. In this particular case here, things are really bad. Not only are the shingles missing, no waterproofing underlayment, but there's also a hole in the roof. So having these addressed as soon as possible so that's not presenting a leak issue is very, very important. And
All
Andrew, I
right,
believe
Kelly,
you
I'm gonna
have a
step
poll.
in here. I'm gonna launch the fourth poll. So just gonna ask, if you have missing shingles, do you need to replace your whole roof? Does everyone know the answer, yes or no? Wow, it's a very overwhelming. Everyone has dealt with this, I'm sure. So I'm just gonna share the results with everyone. So yeah, as you can see, 97% of you have answered no, that you do not have to replace your entire roof. So great job on that, everyone.
Yes, and that is correct, especially with these photos here, or at least in two of them. Again, anyone who was on our last webinar, we talked about different types of shingles, architectural versus 3-tab. These 3-tab shingles like we have here and here have been discontinued. And one of the things about this type of shingle is, especially in areas where there are higher winds, or especially areas close to lakes or anything like that, we tend to see a lot more areas of widespread missing shingles. Again, these can be dealt with as a localized issue, and just replacing shingles as they become damaged or missing in cases like this. It's not a situation where you would have to replace the entire roof. Things like this, typically, again, depending on the height of the roof and the slope of the roof, this is typically something that you can see as you're walking around the complex and report as soon as it's happening. But one of the reasons why we would recommend having somebody actually go up and complete an inspection of the overall roof surfaces of any sloped roof townhomes is because there's sometimes smaller, less noticeable damages or defects that can be occurring with the shingles. So some of those less noticeable damages, and again, these are really small, likely not to be seen from ground level, but any areas where, again, there is exposed plywood or small breakages or small areas of deterioration, these can still cause various issues, so you want to make sure that these are being identified and addressed in the fall. And then one of the biggest issues that we see outside of shingles that are missing or damaged would be exposed nail heads. So in situations like this where the nail heads are exposed, in a case like that, whether they're just trying to speed along the process and get these shingles nailed down quickly so that they can move on to the next one, whatever the case may be, this is not the proper way to install shingles. On the actual package of the shingles, on the shingle itself, when it's being installed, it's very clear where the line is to install the shingles to make sure that these nail heads aren't being exposed, which can lead to various leak issues. So as you can see here, if this nail head was to lift or begin to rust at all, because that's not covered by the shingle, that can cause a leak issue where the water is just getting in and going directly into the attic. In a case like this, with the different shingle colors, in that case, it would likely just be a cosmetic issue. Again, because of the discontinuation of 3-tab shingles, we are seeing more often situations where there isn't an exact color match. This one, I'm assuming it was an emergency situation because it is quite extreme. Usually you can find something that's at least a bit closer of a match. But yeah, any exposed nail heads, you just want to make sure that are addressed so that it's not causing potential leak issues.
All right,
Uh,
so Kelly, I'm gonna jump. Oh, did you want to go first? Sorry.
yeah, just I'm just going to
Oh,
mention this quickly. So with
yeah.
the another issue that we see that again is more of a maintenance item just to make sure that it's not going to become missing or damaged shingles is if there's any areas where shingles are loose and lifting. Again, this is a lot more common with the 3-tab shingles. We don't see it quite as often with the architectural shingles just because they are a little more reinforced. So yeah, we have another poll that we're going to pull up here, just testing everyone's knowledge and seeing what you guys think the best way to repair loose or lifting shingles is.
Yeah, so as Kelly had mentioned, so how can you repair a lifting shingle? I don't think that shared did it. Let me try that again. Excuse me. Yeah, so how can you repair lifting shingles? Replace shingles is popular. That's good. Very good. Apply sealant to the underside and nail them down. All right, so I'm going to end the poll. I'll share the results with everyone. So I'll let Kelly talk a little bit more about that.
Okay, so yeah, if there are any loose or lifting shingles being experienced, we would say either B or C. Apply sealant to the underside or replace the shingle. Either one would be sufficient. There are a lot of times where just applying a sealant like a mastic to the underside to help reinforce it is adequate. In other times, the shingle may need to be replaced. That's going to depend on the situation. One thing is we would not recommend nailing it down because, as we saw in the last slide, that often leads to exposed nail heads, which can present a leak issue. So also with any townhome complexes, aside from the actual shingles, gutters, downspouts, another big thing to take a look at and just make sure is identified in the fall months is any areas that are loose, detached, or damaged. So this could be sections of metal, whether it's the metal fascia or metal siding, vinyl siding, any issues with the soffits like we have here. Where again, this can lead to pest infiltration issues. With these cases here with the loose metal, if it's not damaged, this can just be the existing metal can be reinstalled. If it is left exposed like this, similar to what we were looking at earlier, where when caulking can get behind metal and leave the wood area saturated and lead to leak issues, this can also happen if there's any exposed wood areas like this where the metal flashing has become loose and detached, especially in a situation like this where it's very likely that when snow accumulates, it's just going to be sitting right along this exposed wood area. So before we wrap up, we need to talk about ice damming. It is something that is unique to the winter months. It comes up very, very often. We get a lot of questions about it throughout the winter. We do have a presentation coming up in January where we will be diving further into ice damming because there is a lot to talk about there. But we cannot talk about winter and preparing for winter without at least touching on the subject of ice damming.
Yes, so great call, Kelly. I'm going to share the next two polls. So the first poll, have you experienced ice damming at a building that you manage? Very good. So very 50-50, very split. So that's good for the people that haven't and not so good for the people that have. So very good. I'm going to end the poll there, share the results. Yeah, so as you can see, pretty close to a 50-50 split between ice damming, those of you who have dealt with it and those of you who have not. So I'm going to just launch the last poll question here. And this one says, was your ice damming issue resolved? So did someone resolve your ice issues, your ice damming issues, excuse me?
I don't think that was launched.
That didn't launch. Let me try that again. Apologies, everyone. So
Go.
yes, was your ice damming issue resolved? Very good. Okay. So 75-25, good split of resolved over unresolved. So I'm going to end the poll there and share results with everyone. So very nice. So as you can see, 75% of the people that have experienced ice damming did have their issue resolved.
All right. So whether or not ice damming is something that you have experienced, again, it is such a prevalent issue in the winter months that we want to talk a bit about what it is and how it happens. So for ice damming to occur, the recipe that has to happen first starts with snow accumulation. Following the snow accumulation, heat, which melts the snow, causing it to trickle down to the lower areas of the roof surface. And then if there are below freezing temperatures following the snow accumulation, that can cause the snow to refreeze, which creates the dam and often icicles along the edge of the roof surface or the gutter. So one of the key components there is the heat that is melting the snow and causing it to trickle down and refreeze at the end of the roof surface. Generally, that is from heat loss from the interior of the home and the attic being too hot. So the attic, or the heat from in the home or within the attic, rises up to the highest surface of the roof, causing the snow to melt. Along the eaves troughs here, this area does not receive any heat from the interior of the home, which is where you would see the ice refreezing and causing the icicles or damming at the edge of the roof surface. So just taking a quick look at a typical attic and what it is supposed to look like and what issues can occur if it's faulty and if any issues are occurring. So one of the most important things with your attic is ensuring that it is both properly insulated and ventilated. So to have adequate ventilation and airflow, a few of the things that you want are clear intake vents. So these vents, or the soffits, are going to allow outside cool air to come into the attic, move through and go out through the top vents or the outtake vents. So both of these shouldn't be connected to anything. It's just so air can come in, displace the warm air, move out through the top of the roof surface. Throughout the roof or throughout the attic space, there should be a vapor barrier and insulation, but you want to make sure that the insulation is not blocking the soffits so that the cool air, again, has a path to move through into the attic space. Any interior vent connections for areas like the bathroom or the kitchen should be continuous through to the vent on the roof surface and venting out of the attic completely. Where we start to see issues, especially with that one, and we'll look at a photo in a moment, is where the interior vent connections are not venting through the roof surface. Either it's venting directly into the attic, or there's issues with the connection, it's become detached. However, if it's not going out through the roof surface and to the outside, then that hot, moist air from areas like your kitchen and from the bathroom would just be venting directly into the attic space. Again, if the insulation through the attic is blocking the soffits, then that's not going to allow enough cool air to come in from outside and move through the attic space. If there's any additional issues with the insulation or the vapor barrier, if it's become displaced or is not adequately distributed, again, that's going to prevent the heat from staying inside the home. Just one thing to mention when it comes to ice damming, there's not a one-size-fits-all solution. So something that worked for somebody that you know or at another complex might not necessarily be the best solution for the ice damming issue that you're experiencing, because again, it's going to depend on the specifics of the situation. So if ice damming is occurring, one of the things that we would recommend is completing a thorough attic inspection as well as an inspection of the roof, just to confirm if there are any deficiencies in the attic and to confirm that everything in the attic is working together to create adequate airflow. Some of the issues that we see most often, again, with the interior exhaust fans and ventilation, a very common issue that we see is when the ducting is not properly connected to the roof surface. So in a situation like this, you can't have it just be close to the roof or close to the vent, because again, this is going to allow a lot of air to escape and get out into the attic. You can see that there's some staining here, suspected mold, from the excess air blowing into the attic space. Also, again, with the insulation, just making sure that it is adequately and sufficiently distributed throughout the space so that it is keeping heat inside the home. With the recipe for ice damming, again, you need those below freezing temperatures following the snow accumulation for the icicles to form. So there are some cases where you could be having issues in the attic, but you might not necessarily see icicles forming or ice building up along the eaves troughs. But that doesn't necessarily mean that there aren't additional issues occurring. A lot of the time when we're looking at ice damming issues, there can also be condensation issues occurring. And a lot of the times the condensation can create issues not only in the attic, but it can create interior leak issues as well. So ensuring that the attic is adequately ventilated and insulated, not just going to prevent ice damming, but also any condensation issues. And just taking a look at something that we saw on a flat roof townhome. So in this particular case, the leak was only occurring in the winter months and only when it was very, very cold outside. In the bathroom area where the leak was presenting, the staining and the damage wasn't too bad. However, when we cut the drywall, there was water sitting behind the ceiling. The insulation behind the ceiling was covered in mold. When we went up to the roof surface, you can see that there is some snow sitting along the roof edge, but it's not covered throughout the roof surfaces. So it is a bit odd that this one vent in particular has water at the base of it where there isn't water throughout or at the other vents. Taking a closer look at the vent, there are water droplets from condensation on the outside of the vent, whereas the nearby vents were found dry throughout the roof surface. When the top of the vent was open, the insulation throughout was completely saturated. The pipe going through was completely corroded and needed to be replaced. And this was all just because of a small disconnection in the vent. So just a couple things to look out for. Again, these tips, they're not foolproof. They're not going to stop all ice damming issues, but in some cases it may help you to get ahead of ice damming or condensation issues. So in a case like the example we just looked at, if you are having anybody up on the roof in the winter, whether it's for an inspection or for a leak situation, just taking a look to see if there are any inconsistencies like that particular vent. Is there one vent that has any condensation or water built up around it where the other ones do not? If there's not already a leak issue occurring, this could be a good situation to inspect the area below to see if there are any signs of staining and potentially cut the drywall to see if there's anything happening behind the ceiling that may indicate a brewing leak issue. Another thing that can be done just to test the functionality of your bathroom fan is to complete a tissue test. So sometimes you can turn the fan on and it may make a sound and appear to be functioning, but sometimes it's not necessarily. So a good way to test the functionality and make sure that it is actually venting air from that space would be to take 2 plies of tissue paper and hold it up to the vent when it's turned on to ensure that it is going to stick to the vent surface like this. So if it's not holding or if it's only holding slightly, that can be an indication of something happening with the fan. And again, it's not foolproof. This doesn't mean that if the fan's not working, then you have a condensation issue in the attic. It could be a situation where a part needs to be replaced or something needs to be cleaned, but it could be an indication to check the attic just to make sure that everything is functioning properly. And again, because of the fact that icicles aren't going to form unless there are below freezing temperatures following the snow accumulation, one thing that you can look out for, especially in the days immediately following snowfall, is just the overall snow coverage on roof surfaces. So if you have a particular complex where all of the roofs throughout the complex are covered in snow, but you have one roof that is only slightly covered, and even if there's no icicles occurring, if there is significant melt at one unit or a handful of units and not the others, that's usually a pretty good indication that that melt is coming from attic heat as opposed to the temperature outside. So again, if this is occurring, even if there's a situation where the icicles haven't formed or haven't formed yet, we would recommend having attic inspections completed at these locations just to confirm that everything's working properly. All right, so just in conclusion, just to wrap up what we just talked about, again, the volatility of winter weather and the winter months can add a lot of stress to your roof system, regardless of whether you have a tower or a townhome or what type of membrane or shingles are on those roof systems. So just to get ahead of it and make sure that your buildings are able to withstand those harsh winter weather, completing inspections and carrying out any maintenance items is recommended just to make sure that you're mitigating any winter issues. Um, during the winter months, if you do have any leaks that are occurring, we do still recommend having them dealt with as soon as possible, as opposed to waiting till the spring, especially in really severe situations, just because you don't want any damages, whether on the roof or in the interior, to become worse by holding off on dealing with and addressing that leak issue. Also, just if there are any major weather events in the winter months, whether it's snowstorms, rainstorms, whatever the case may be, something that we recommend is having somebody from the building, when they're doing a walkthrough of the building, is check areas below any roof surfaces, whether it's a mechanical room or otherwise, various hallways, just to make sure that there isn't anything happening, whether it's early signs of a leak, or like we have in these cases here, any areas where you can see daylight from inside the building. If you can see outside, water can then get in. So just making sure that these areas are addressed so they're not presenting leak issues.
All right, well, very good, Kelly, very informative. Thank you for all that. We are going to get into our question and answer period at the moment. So Jessica, if you wanted to ask a few questions. If we
Yeah,
do not get to answering your question, we will submit all the questions to you via email with answers as well. So go
yeah,
ahead,
okay.
sorry.
Thanks, Andy. So the first question that we have here is it recommended to install leaf guards on the gutters?
Yeah, so great question. And it's something that comes up very often when we are talking about preparing for winter or just about various maintenance items for sloped roofs and gutters. When it comes to leaf guards, they can be a way to help prevent large buildup of debris in the gutters or in the gutters themselves. However, because they're perforated to allow water to get in, you can still have buildup of debris getting in. So we would recommend that even if you have leaf guards installed, you would still want to have your gutters checked and cleaned ahead of the winter months. So having them installed doesn't mean that you don't need to clean your gutters or you don't need to be checking them. You can still experience blockages from debris buildup even if you have them installed. If they are installed, depending on the situation, it can become a bit more time consuming to complete the gutter cleaning, because then you need to remove the gutter guards, clean the gutters, and then put them back on. So some people do like the idea of them. However, they're not going to overall stop any debris from getting into the gutters, and you would still be required to complete regular gutter cleaning to avoid any buildup of debris and blockages.
Okay. And when is the best time to clean gutters or downpipes?
I mean, it's going to depend on the situation and how much is actually built up in the gutter system. This time of year during fall, definitely recommended. However, you do have to closely monitor the weather and also be keeping in mind how much debris has fallen from the leaves nearby. You don't want to say, I'm going to have my gutters cleaned before October 1st, because if all the leaves haven't fallen and you have somebody come out and clean the gutters, additional debris falls, then you're just going to have somebody come back at a later date. It does become a bit tricky because sometimes there is a very small window between when all the leaf debris has fallen and when it starts to become really cold and we're experiencing frost, where the debris can be a bit harder to clean because it's freezing in the gutter surface. So I apologize that wasn't the clearest answer, but it will depend on the weather we're experiencing and how much debris is actually built up in the gutters. So it's just something that needs to be monitored quite closely.
Okay. And just because we have a bit of a time crunch, this will be our last question. But as Andy mentioned, we will have them answered anything else that was asked. So are metal roofs a better option for maintenance and repairs and durability?
Metal roofs are great roof systems, arguably one of the longest lasting roof systems, and one of the lowest overall maintenance requirements. Especially now they have metal roof systems with concealed fasteners. So one of the biggest maintenance items on metal roofs would be dealing with the exposed fasteners, if that's what type of roof it is. Just because, again, if they start to lift over time or start to rust, then you would want to replace or seal those as they became an issue. But overall maintenance on a metal roof is extremely minimal, and they last a very long time. That being said, the upfront cost of metal roof installation is significantly higher than all of the other roof systems. So we don't see it as often, especially in condos, and especially in residential condos. But overall, metal roofs are a fantastic roof system.
Great. So again, I just wanted to thank everyone for joining us today. As I mentioned before the start, the end of the week, you will receive an email with the recording of the webinar, as well as a winter checklist for towers and townhomes. That way you can make sure that you're up to speed once the winter months do come around. We're also going to provide a link to register for our next webinar, which will be November 22nd at 1 p.m. And the title of that one will be Reviewing Roof Leaks, Common Causes, Complications, and Coming to a Solution. Again, Kelly will be presenting that. And again, for anyone interested in a no charge roof assessment, on the bottom left hand of this slide, you will see service@detailroof.ca, as well as the phone number. Please feel free to email and or phone call, and we will get that set up for you. So thank you again, everyone, for coming. We will be sending you an email by the end of the week. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day.